Jesus Christ, are you trying to gargle it? Just say Chateau Lafitte. It's not that hard. The voice, a whip crack of condescending venom, belonged to Adrian Croft. He leaned back in his plush leather chair, making a deliberate spectacle of his disgust, his voice loud enough to curdle the atmosphere at the surrounding tables. With a cruel, exaggerated twist of his mouth, he mimicked Amara's soft, measured pronunciation, drawing a round of sycophantic, uncomfortable snickers from his entourage of business associates. Lafitte, he sneered, dragging the sound out like something foul he was trying to scrape off his tongue. The heat rushed to Amara's face, a deep blush creeping up her neck that she prayed was invisible against her dark skin. Every eye in the Michelin-starred restaurant, Ethelgard, a hushed temple of wealth and power, pivoted to pin her in a spotlight of humiliation. The heavy, leather-bound wine list trembled almost imperceptibly in her hands, as Croft, the CEO of Croft Global, continued his brutal performance. I swear they let just anyone wander in off the street these days. He glanced down at his own wrist, adjusting a Patek Philippe watch that cost more than her entire master's degree. Probably thinks a sommelier is some kind of goddamn spaghetti. He chuckled, turning to his guest of honor. Don't you worry, Mr. Kenji, he said, addressing the Japanese tech mogul at the head of the table. We'll get you a real drink, as soon as Sweetheart here figures out how to open a bottle without hurting herself. Mr. Kenji looked down at his meticulously arranged napkin, his face a mask of polite discomfort at the naked racism seasoning the air. Without a single flicker of her professional composure, Amara Vance turned her full attention to Mr. Kenji. Then, in flawless, Kyoto-accented Japanese, she spoke, her voice calm and clear. Shiri itashimasu, okyaku-sama. Wain no sanchi no rekishiteki haikei kara go setsumei sasete itadakimashou ka? Sir, with your permission, would you prefer I describe the wine's provincial heritage before I proceed with the serving? The entire table went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the thick Aubusson carpet. Mr. Kenji's eyebrows shot up toward his hairline in stunned surprise, while Croft's self-satisfied smirk froze, cracking on his face like cheap porcelain. He didn't understand the words, but he understood, with sickening certainty, that he had just lost control of the room. What you're about to hear is a story that will make your blood boil and your spirit soar. A story that proves that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. If you believe in the underdog, that true worth can never be silenced, then you are in the right place. Smash that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications, because you are not going to want to miss a single second of what happens next. The brutal shriek of a 4:45 a.m. alarm ripped through the profound darkness of Amara's tiny, one-bedroom apartment. She slapped the snooze button instantly, a reflexive gesture born from a deep-seated fear of waking her grandmother sleeping in the only bedroom across the hall. At 29 years old, Amara Vance was 1,000,000 miles away from where she was supposed to be. A framed master's degree in applied linguistics, earned with honors from the University of Tokyo, hung on her wall, a silent testament to a life that had been abruptly and indefinitely postponed. Beside it was a faded, joyful photograph of her standing under the cherry blossoms on campus, a ghost from a different world. She moved with the practiced quiet of a cat through her morning routine, her fingers absently tracing Japanese kanji in a worn notebook, while the kettle hissed and rattled on the stove. 4 years ago, just as she was preparing her doctoral dissertation on cross-cultural negotiation theory, her grandmother's health had collapsed in a terrifying cascade of strokes and heart failure. Amara had dropped everything: her PhD, the prestigious fellowships, the promise of a life in academia, to come home and care for the woman who had single-handedly raised her. The academic job offers had dwindled and then vanished, replaced by the grim, reliable necessity of a steady paycheck from restaurant work. "Morning, my little songbird," her grandmother's voice, raspy but warm, called out from the doorway. She appeared in her wheelchair, a small, frail woman swallowed by a thick cardigan, but with eyes that remained as sharp and knowing as a hawk's. "Made your favorite oolong, Gran," Amara replied, pouring the steaming, fragrant liquid into a well-loved mug adorned with hand-painted koi fish. "Double shift at that fancy palace again?" her grandmother asked, her fingers swollen and twisted with arthritis, wrapping gratefully around the warm ceramic. Amara nodded, tucking a thick linguistics journal into the tote bag that served as her purse. "Mr. Davies scheduled me for the main VIP room tonight. Big tech buyout dinner. Means better tips, which means we can finally get that new pressure mattress you need." She deliberately omitted the other details of her job. The constant, casual dismissals, the assumptions made based on her uniform and skin color, the way powerful men would look right through her as they ordered, as if she were a piece of talking furniture. "You know what my own mama used to say?" her grandmother offered, a familiar and beloved refrain that had stitched itself through the fabric of their lives. "Your education is a jewel. They can take your house, they can take your money, but they can never, ever steal what's inside your head." Amara smiled, a genuine, loving smile that momentarily erased the weariness from her eyes. She leaned down and kissed the older woman's forehead, the skin as soft and thin as aged parchment. "And I've got a whole treasure chest in here, Gran, just waiting for someone to notice the investment potential." She straightened her crisp black server's uniform, the starchy fabric feeling like a costume. The weight of her two colliding worlds, the scholar and the server, settled on her shoulders as she headed for the door, preparing to perform her role in a play she had never auditioned for. Ethelgard gleamed under the soft, golden glow of Murano glass chandeliers, a breathtaking monument to wealth and exclusivity carved into the heart of the city's financial district. White damask tablecloths stretched across each table like a fresh, undisturbed snowfall, waiting for the evening's titans of industry to arrive and claim their territory. Amara slipped in through the back service entrance, her worn sneakers silent on the checkered floor. She exchanged a nod with Hector, the dishwasher, a kind man with sad eyes who had been scrubbing pots in this same kitchen for 30 years. The air hummed with the electric pre-service energy, chefs barking orders in a rapid-fire Spanglish, the percussive machine gun rhythm of knives on wooden blocks, the violent sizzle of pans hitting industrial-grade burners. "Vance, you're on the main dais tonight. Tables 8 through 12. Manager Davies' voice sliced through the kitchen noise. He approached her, his bespoke Italian loafers clicking on the grimy tile floor. Davies was a gaunt man with perpetually anxious eyes, his entire being dedicated to the twin goals of pleasing the restaurant's owner and appeasing its wealthiest patrons. "It's the Croft Global Delegation, closing a deal with Kenji Tanaka from Cybercore in Japan. These are 9-figure clients, so for God's sake, don't screw it up." "Yes, sir," Amara replied, pushing her journal deeper into the bottom of her locker, out of sight. Davies, of course, caught the movement. "And none of that?" He gestured vaguely at her bag with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Whatever weird foreign crap you read. This is a 5-star establishment, not the public library. Remember your role here. You are background music. Pleasant, unobtrusive, and silent unless directly addressed." Across the bustling prep room, Cody, a blonde, smirking server with a fraction of her experience but all the right credentials in Davies' eyes, was getting a one-on-one briefing on wine pairings for the evening. "The sommelier specifically requested you for the Hendersons' party," Davies told him with a chummy smile. "They really appreciate your insights." Amara had to physically bite the inside of her cheek to keep from speaking. Just last week, she had gently corrected Cody's pronunciation of a Sancerre vintage, only to be told by him to Stick to pouring water. The Croft party will probably have questions about the wine, Davies instructed her, already turning his back and walking away. Just come get me if they need anything complicated. And Amara, he added without looking back, try to tone down that accent of yours. These are sophisticated international people. She watched his retreating back, the crisp white of his shirt, a stark contrast to the boiling anger in her chest. She turned and began straightening the polished silver on her serving tray, aligning each fork and knife with mathematical precision. She had long ago memorized the entire 500-bottle wine list, including vintage variations, terroir characteristics, and optimal pairings in English, French, and Japanese. Not that a single person had ever bothered to ask. The invisible architecture of the restaurant was as clear and rigid as the crystal glasses from which its patrons drank. Some people were cast in the spotlight. Others were relegated permanently to the shadows. The pre-dinner lull offered a precious, fleeting 15 minutes of quiet. While other servers scrolled through social media on their phones or stepped out back for a cigarette, Amara claimed a small, secluded table in the staff break room. She extracted her weathered copy of Advanced Business Japanese for International Negotiations from her bag, her fingers instantly finding the dog-eared page marked with yesterday's bus ticket. A river of complex kanji characters flowed across the page, a form of visual poetry that had captivated her since she first laid eyes on it in an undergraduate textbook. She traced them with the tip of her finger, her lips moving silently as she mouthed complex phrases about intellectual property rights and cross-border M&A strategy. In another life, a life that felt 1,000,000 miles away, she would be deploying these words in a Tokyo boardroom, not cramming them in a windowless break room that smelled faintly of stale coffee and industrial cleaning agents. Korera no keiyoku jouken ni tsuite, ikutsuka gennen shichon wo tiki shitai to omoimasu. I would like to raise some concerns regarding these contract terms, she whispered to herself, her pronunciation flawless, a finely honed skill sharpened over 3 intense years of academic and cultural immersion in Japan before her grand's health had violently yanked her home. The sound of footsteps approached. In a single, fluid motion born of long practice, Amara slid the textbook beneath a stack of menus and snatched up her order pad, instantly appearing to be reviewing the evening's specials. Manager Davies filled the doorway, his thin frame casting a long shadow. Croft's party just called. They're running 30 minutes early, and Tanaka's people are already on their way. His narrow eyes landed on her table, a sliver of suspicion in his gaze. What are you doing? Memorizing the chef's specials, sir, she replied smoothly, holding up the pad as evidence. He seemed satisfied with the answer. Good. And remember what I told you. These Japanese businessmen are a big deal. Smile, nod, pour the wine. Don't even think about trying to join the conversation. Of course not, sir. After he swept away, Amara retrieved her book. She ran her fingers over a Japanese proverb she had penciled in the margin years ago. Yumo kazareba guangnashi. The gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a person perfected without trials. She closed the book, tucking it deep into her bag. Tonight would be another trial, another performance as the invisible server. It was a role that chafed against every fiber of her being, a costume that had never quite fit, but one she had learned to wear with flawless, heartbreaking perfection. The grand entrance doors of Ethelgard swung open at precisely 6:45 p.m. First came the security detail. 2 stoic men, in dark, impeccably tailored suits, who scanned the opulent dining room with the practiced, emotionless efficiency of predators. They were followed by a small cluster of aides carrying sleek tablets and embossed leather portfolios. Then, Mr. Kenji Tanaka entered. Unlike the loud, ostentatious American CEOs Amara was accustomed to serving, Tanaka moved with an understated, almost serene confidence. His charcoal suit was a masterpiece of bespoke tailoring, but it wasn't flashy. His only visible indulgence was a simple, elegant Grand Seiko watch that caught the chandelier light with a subtle gleam as he removed his coat. In his late 50s, his salt and pepper hair framed a face marked by a deep, formidable intelligence rather than arrogance. As the visionary behind Cybercore, the tech billionaire had famously transformed a tiny Kyoto startup into a global AI juggernaut. Amara recognized him instantly from the dozens of articles she'd read in the Nikkei and the Financial Times while studying in Japan. She observed all of this from a distance while arranging heavy water goblets at their reserved table on the main dais. She recognized two other executives from Cybercore's international expansion team, men whose faces she knew from business journals. "Mr. Tanaka and his party have arrived," the hostess announced in a hushed, reverent tone to Manager Davies, who immediately abandoned the terrified-looking junior server he was briefing and practically glided over to greet the party. "Welcome to Ethelgard, Mr. Tanaka. It is a profound honor to have you with us tonight." Davies' voice had climbed half an octave, his usual sternness dissolving into a puddle of obsequious deference. Amara overheard one of Tanaka's associates murmur something in Japanese about a specific, custom-blended Gyokuro tea they had requested in advance. Davies nodded enthusiastically, a blank look of utter confusion in his eyes. "Vance," he hissed, as he passed her on his way to the table. "Get that special weird tea set out of the upstairs storage. You know, the one for the Asian guests. Move it." As she moved to comply, Amara heard the front doors swing open again, with significantly more force. Adrian Croft had arrived, the swaggering American CEO hosting tonight's dinner, a man notorious throughout the city's service industry for his explosive temper and his vile treatment of staff. The stage was set, the evening's players were assembled, and the friction was about to begin. Adrian Croft's entrance wasn't just an arrival, it was an invasion. He commanded attention exactly as he intended to. The CEO of Croft Global stood an imposing 6'2", with perfectly coiffed silver hair and a deep mahogany tan that screamed of recent weekends spent on a private yacht in the Caribbean. His handmade Brioni suit probably cost more than Amara's annual rent. "Kenji, there you are!" Croft's voice boomed across the restaurant, a sonic boom of forced bonhomie. He strode towards the Japanese delegation with his arms outstretched, a conquering hero returning to his domain. "Hope my guys didn't keep you waiting long." Mr. Tanaka offered a polite, shallow bow. "We have only just arrived, Mr. Croft." "Adrian, please," Croft corrected, clapping Tanaka firmly on the shoulder with a level of physical familiarity that made the Japanese mogul flinch almost imperceptibly. "We're about to be partners, after all." He guided the group toward their table, acknowledging Manager Davies' fawning presence with a curt, dismissive nod. Amara returned with the ornate tea set just as everyone was being seated. She arranged the delicate porcelain cups and cast-iron pot with practiced grace on the side credenza, aware of Mr. Tanaka's appreciative glance. "Whoa, we won't be needing that." Croft waved a dismissive hand at the elegant tea service. "Bring us your best single malt. The Glenmorangie 25, if you have it, a real drink." "But sir, Mr. Tanaka specifically requested," Davies began to stammer. "Trust me," Croft interrupted, throwing a conspiratorial wink at Tanaka. "In America, big deals are sealed with good whiskey, not grass water. Am I right?" Tanaka's expression remained utterly neutral, but Amara, trained to read the subtle, non-verbal cues of Japanese culture, caught the brief, fleeting shadow of disappointment, or perhaps offense, that crossed his eyes. As Amara moved around the table pouring mineral water, Croft barely glanced in her direction. She was a ghost, a functioning automaton, moving with the quiet efficiency her job required. "Y'all will find tonight's featured special is a pan-seared Icelandic cod," she explained, her soft Tidewater, Virginia accent, normally a point of private pride, feeling suddenly thick and clumsy under the weight of the moment. It's served with a Yukon Gold potato puree, braised leeks, and a champagne-infused beurre blanc. "I'll have the steak. Medium rare." Croft cut her off mid-sentence. He turned back to Tanaka with that same condescending smirk. "Don't worry if you didn't quite catch all that. Our servers here in the South have their own unique way of speaking." Amara kept the professional smile plastered on her face, but her fingers tightened around the heavy glass pitcher until her knuckles went white. "What was that you said now?" Croft continued, his cruelty finding a new target. "Y'all will find?" He mimicked her accent with exaggerated, mocking slowness, drawing out each syllable as if she were a simple-minded child. "I tell you, sometimes I feel like I need a damn translator just to order dinner in my own country." He let out a sharp, barking laugh, looking around the table for approval. His American cronies chuckled on cue. The Japanese delegation shifted uncomfortably. One of Tanaka's associates forced a pained, polite smile, while Tanaka himself remained impassive, his dark eyes now studying Amara with a quiet, unreadable intensity. "Now imagine trying to explain complex data architecture specifications." Croft pressed on, seemingly oblivious to the ice-cold tension radiating from the other side of the table. "No offense to our charming waitress here, of course," he added, finally glancing at her, "but some people are just better suited to certain roles in life." Speaking of which, he pivoted seamlessly back to business, effectively erasing Amara from the conversation, as if she had never been there at all. As she stepped away from the table, her body on autopilot, she heard him lower his voice to a conspiratorial murmur. "Between us, Kenji, I found it's best to keep the instructions simple with certain types. The language barrier with your team in Tokyo is challenge enough without adding a layer of local dialect to the mix." Amara disappeared through the swinging doors into the kitchen, her cheeks burning, not with shame or embarrassment, but with a cold, simmering rage she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Back in the controlled chaos of the kitchen, Amara found a moment of refuge by the service station. Her hand trembled almost violently as she arranged warm bread rolls in a basket, a familiar, mundane rhythm that usually calmed her frayed nerves. But not tonight, not even 20 minutes into the service, and Adrian Croft had already reduced her to a punchline, a racist caricature with a charming accent, but no substance, no intelligence, no humanity. She had weathered countless microaggressions before, the subtle digs, the patronizing assumptions. But this was different. This was a deliberate public vivisection of her dignity. Perhaps it was seeing the quiet, profound dignity of Mr. Tanaka contrasted so starkly against Croft's brute arrogance, or perhaps she had simply reached her limit. "You okay, Mija?" Hector asked, pausing with a heavy stack of clean plates. "That bastard at the dais is a real pendejo." "I'm fine," she replied automatically. The restaurant worker's mantra, always fine, always smiling, always accommodating. But she wasn't fine. She was coming apart at the seams. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind, as clear as if she were standing right beside her. "You weren't raised to swallow poison and call it dinner, Amara Vance. Your mama would have slapped a man for talking to you that way, and you know I'm too old to do it for her. Her mother. Brilliant, fierce, funny, and gone far too soon." She had indeed never tolerated an ounce of disrespect from anyone. But she also hadn't been trapped by the crushing, practical realities Amara now juggled every single day. Her grand's mountain of medical bills, the ever-increasing rent, the student loans that felt like a permanent anchor around her neck. Amara glanced at her faint reflection in the polished surface of a serving tray. The woman staring back had spent 4 long years systematically dimming her own light, speaking more softly, smiling more readily, making herself smaller and smaller to fit into the cramped box society had built for her. And for what? For a semblance of security that felt more and more like a cage every day. "Order up for the dais." The head chef's bellow yanked her back to the present. As she carefully arranged the intricate appetizers on her tray, Amara quickly calculated the cost of dignity. One wrong move, one sharp word, and she could be unemployed by morning. No severance, no references, and most terrifyingly, no health insurance for Gran. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on her shoulders, heavier than any tray laden with expensive food. Would speaking up even accomplish anything? She wondered, straightening her uniform. Would a man like Adrian Croft even be capable of listening? She had no answer as she pushed through the kitchen doors, her heavy tray perfectly balanced, her practiced smile firmly in place. But deep inside her, something had fundamentally shifted. A quiet, tectonic rebellion was taking root, gathering force, just waiting for the right moment to break through the surface and shake the entire world. Amara approached the dais with the first course, her movements as fluid and unobtrusive as a shadow. The conversation halted for a brief moment as she set down delicate plates of seared Wagyu tataki and toro tartare. "Perfect timing," Croft declared grandly. "We were just getting to the really interesting part." She offered a polite, imperceptible nod and stepped back to the side credenza, appearing to busy herself with folding fresh napkins, while remaining perfectly within earshot. Years of being treated as invisible furniture had honed her eavesdropping skills to a razor's edge. Croft leaned forward, lowering his voice to a theatrical, confidential level. "Now, about those licensing terms we discussed last week, Kenji, I've had our legal team make some minor tweaks, just to streamline things. Section 7, subparagraph B. One of Tanaka's associates said something in rapid, low Japanese, his tone sharp and questioning. He is asking about the provisions for intellectual property. The company's designated translator, a young, earnest American man whose stilted, textbook Japanese betrayed his inexperience, explained. "Nothing to worry about," Croft assured them with a magnanimous wave of his hand. "Standard boilerplate, just language protecting both our interests. The translated summary your team received covers all the basics." Amara's ears perked up. Something in Croft's oily, dismissive tone sent a chill down her spine. As she silently refilled water glasses, she caught fragments of the hushed Japanese conversation between Tanaka and his team. They were expressing deep concern about the requirements for technology transfer, but they were struggling to articulate their specific, technical questions through their young translator, whose vocabulary seemed limited to general business pleasantries. "Yori minkyak na jouken wo yakyu subeki desu." "We should demand more clear terms," Tanaka said, his voice laced with a frustration he was trying, and failing, to conceal. "They would like more, clear terms," the translator offered hesitantly. "It's all standard, I promise," Croft repeated, sliding a sheaf of documents across the table. "Industry boilerplate. Look, I know these things can get tedious with all the back-and-forth translating. Why don't we just focus on the big picture tonight, on the synergies?" What Amara heard next made her freeze, her hand hovering over a water goblet. Keeping his voice in a near whisper, and speaking to his American colleague beside him, Croft said, "Don't worry. They'll never spot the territorial exclusivity clause we buried in Appendix C. By the time their lawyers in Tokyo untangle it, we'll have their core AI algorithm so deeply integrated into our systems, they won't have a choice but to play ball." Amara carefully, silently, set down the water pitcher, her mind racing, her blood turning to ice. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. This wasn't just racism. This was calculated, predatory fraud. The weight of what she'd just overheard pressed down on Amara's chest, a physical and crushing weight. Croft wasn't just being a condescending pig. He was actively, gleefully exploiting the language barrier to defraud Mr. Tanaka's company. Those minor tweaks would essentially grant Croft global, unrestricted, perpetual rights to Cybercore's proprietary technology, while simultaneously locking them out of all European and South American markets. It was corporate piracy dressed up in a Brioni suit. Amara paced by the dessert station, her thoughts a violent, swirling storm. This was profoundly, unequivocally wrong. But what in God's name could she do? What should she do? The sensible part of her brain, the part that paid the rent and managed Grand's medication schedule, screamed at her, "Do nothing. Say nothing. Keep your head down. This isn't your company. It isn't your deal. And it sure as hell isn't your problem. You are here to serve food, collect a tip, and go home." But the other part of her, the scholar who had once dreamed of building bridges of understanding between cultures and languages, couldn't stomach the act of deliberate, malicious miscommunication happening right in front of her. "Vance, where in the hell is the Saint-Emilion for the dais?" Davy's sharp voice sliced through her frantic thoughts. "Coming right up," she answered on autopilot, her feet carrying her toward the temperature-controlled wine cellar. As she carefully decanted the expensive ruby-red Bordeaux, allowing it to breathe, Amara frantically considered her options. She could try to pass a discreet note to Mr. Tanaka, but that was absurdly risky and would be immediately suspicious. She could try to find a moment to speak to him privately, but when? The opportunities were non-existent. And even if she did manage it, why on earth would a billionaire titan of industry believe a random waitress over a potential business partner? The main course would be served within minutes. After that, Croft would push for signatures. The window of opportunity, to do the right thing, to detonate her own life, was closing with terrifying speed. Amara's hand stilled on the neck of the wine bottle. A third option emerged from the swirling chaos of her mind. An option so bold, so insane, so career-suicidal, that it took her breath away. She could intervene directly. She could speak up, right there at the table, in perfect Japanese, and expose both her linguistic abilities and Croft's deception in one shocking, irreversible moment. Her grandmother's words echoed again, no longer a gentle comfort, but a call to arms. Your education is a jewel. They can never steal what's inside your head. Perhaps it was finally time to show them just how valuable that jewel was. Balancing the heavy tray with hands that were now surprisingly steady, and a heart that was pounding like a war drum, Amara pushed through the kitchen doors. By the time she reached the dais, her decision was made. There was no turning back now. What would you do in this situation? Risk your livelihood, your ability to care for your family, everything you've worked for, all to do the right thing for a stranger? Or would you stay silent to survive? Let me know your honest gut reaction in the comments below. And if you're finding this story as gripping as I am, do me a quick favor and smash that like button. It tells the algorithm you want more real-life stories like Amara's, and it truly helps support the channel. The main course arrived with the synchronized theatrical precision of a ballet. A small army of servers descended on the dais simultaneously with steaming plates of filet mignon and pan-seared cod as Amara approached with the decanted wine. The conversation at the table had grown more intense, with Croft dominating the discussion, talking over his counterpart, and the young translator visibly struggling to keep up with the technical jargon. Now, before we get to the final signatures, I've prepared a simple executive summary of the key takeaways, Croft announced, sliding glossy, bound documents across the table. Just the highlights, of course. Nothing your team hasn't already had a chance to review. Mr. Tanaka accepted the papers with a polite nod, though his brow was furrowed with lingering uncertainty. His associate whispered something urgently in Japanese about the territorial restrictions they had previously flagged as a concern. "That's nothing to worry about," Croft assured them, deliberately misrepresenting the whispered concern as a minor point of clarification. "Standard procedure." Amara positioned herself at Mr. Tanaka's right shoulder, her movements deliberate and precise. She began to pour the rich Bordeaux into his glass. The ruby liquid caught the chandelier light as it flowed, a perfect match for the color rising in her own cheeks. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, wild thing. She completed the pour, and then, instead of moving on to the next guest, she remained standing right beside him, a silent, composed statue. "Shili itashimasu, Tianzhongyang." "Excuse me, Mr. Tanaka," she said, her voice perfect, academically precise Japanese. "Kigashu no furyu shi chosou ni kanshite, bukai ga shoujiteiru kanousei ga aru ka to zonjimasu." "I believe there may be a significant misunderstanding regarding the appendix clauses in the contract." The table fell so silent it felt as if all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Even the distant clatter of silverware and the low hum of conversations from across the restaurant seemed to pause, suspended in a moment of collective shock. Tanaka turned his head slowly to face her. Pure, unadulterated astonishment written in his widened eyes. Continuing in flawless, formal Japanese, Amara spoke with clarity and profound respect. "Sono bunshu ha, kurofu to global sha no cheirin nashi ni, saiba koa sha ga yorotsuba oyobi nanbei shichou de doritsu shite jigyou o okonou koto o tonageru haitatekina na reidoken ni genki shite imasu. Kore wa先ほど議論されていた条件とは激しく異なります." The document references exclusive territorial rights that would prevent CyberCore from operating independently in European and South American markets without Croft Global's express approval. This differs significantly from the terms you were just discussing. She maintained perfect, professional composure, though she could feel Manager Davies' horrified, bug-eyed stare burning into her from across the room. Adrian Croft's face had undergone a spectacular transformation, morphing from smug confidence to utter confusion to apoplectic fury in the span of 10 seconds. Mr. Tanaka studied her face intently for a long moment before responding in Japanese. あなたの日本語は驚くほど流暢ですね。続けてください. You speak with remarkable fluency. Please continue. さらに, additionally, she said, setting down the heavy wine bottle with a steady hand that betrayed none of the turmoil inside her. 知的財産権の状況とは、共通開発にとどまらず、既存の技術にまで積んでいます。これにより、季節のコアアルゴリズムへの物出現のアクセスが仕事上許可されることになります。The intellectual property provisions extend beyond joint development to include your pre-existing technologies, essentially granting unrestricted access to your company's core AI algorithms. The power dynamic at the table had not just shifted, it had been violently, irrevocably detonated. For 3 long, breathless seconds, nobody moved. The ambient noise of the restaurant seemed distant and muffled, as if Amara and the occupants of the dais existed in their own private bubble of suspended time. Croft was the first to recover, his million-dollar smile straining at the edges, looking like a rubber mask about to snap. "I have no idea what she's saying, Kenji, but I assure you it's absolute nonsense." "She is saying," Mr. Tanaka interrupted, his voice a blade of ice as he switched to measured, perfect English, "that your contract contains terms that are significantly, materially different from what you have been verbally describing to me. His gaze never once left Amara's face. Terms that would be profoundly unfavorable to my company. Croft's healthy yacht club tan had dissolved into a mottled, blotchy red. "This is completely and utterly inappropriate. Davies!" he bellowed, frantically searching the room for the manager. Davies materialized instantly, practically sprinting to the table. "Sir, I am so sorry for this intrusion. I don't know what got into her. Amara will be removed immediately. Fired, of course." "No." Mr. Tanaka's single word, spoken quietly, carried the unassailable authority of a king. "She will stay." Croft leaned forward, his voice dropping to a harsh, venomous whisper. "Kenji, this is absurd. You can't possibly take the word of a common waitress over a linguistics scholar who speaks Japanese more fluently and honestly than your own translator?" Tanaka finished for him. He then switched back to Japanese to address Amara directly. "Dochira de mienkyang sareta no desu ka?" "Where did you study?" "Dongjing Daga desu, sir. The University of Tokyo, sir," she replied, her voice steady, still maintaining her professional server's composure, despite the electric high-stakes drama swirling around her. "3年に修士班を取得しました." "I completed my master's degree there 3 years ago." Tanaka nodded, a look of deep appreciation on his face, before turning his piercing gaze back to Croft. "I would prefer to continue our discussion with Ms. Vance present to ensure complete and accurate communication." Croft's fingers began to drum a frantic, staccato rhythm against the tablecloth, his mind clearly racing behind the mask of forced affability. Davies hovered nearby like a nervous ghost, torn between his reflexive need to please a wealthy customer and the utterly unprecedented situation exploding before his eyes. The delicate, carefully constructed power balance of the evening had been completely upended, leaving everyone, except perhaps for Mr. Tanaka, floundering to find their footing in this shocking new reality. "This is highly irregular, Kenji," Croft protested, his voice strained with a desperate, failing attempt at cordiality. "Our companies have professional vetted translators for exactly these matters." Mr. Tanaka turned to his own translator, the young man who now looked as if he might spontaneously combust from sheer discomfort. They exchanged a few brief, quiet words in Japanese. "With all due respect, sir," the translator said, bowing slightly to his boss. "I acknowledge that my business and legal vocabulary is limited. I was hired primarily for general conversational facilitation." Tanaka nodded, then addressed the entire table. "I believe we would all benefit from absolute precision at this critical stage of our negotiations." He gestured to the empty, high-backed chair between himself and his chief financial officer. "Ms. Vance, would you please join us?" The invitation hung in the air like a formal declaration of war. Amara could feel the weight of every eye in the restaurant on her. Servers paused mid-stride with trays in their hands, Davies staring at her with an expression of pure, unadulterated horror, Croft's face a thundercloud of barely contained fury. "Sir, company policy strictly prohibits staff from—" Davies began to sputter, his voice cracking. "I will gladly compensate the restaurant for her time," Tanaka interrupted smoothly. "Consider it a consulting fee for specialized linguistic and cultural services. Say, a fee of $10,000. The sum silenced Davies instantly. Even Croft's objections died in his throat. $15,000, Tanaka stated calmly. For the remainder of the evening. Paid directly to your restaurant, of course. Without another word, Amara carefully set down her serving tray. She untied the strings of her black apron, folded it neatly, and handed both to a slack-jawed, catatonic Davies. With the quiet, unassailable dignity of a queen ascending to her throne, She walked to the table and took the offered seat. Her back was straight, her hands folded professionally on the polished wood. "Thank you, Mr. Tanaka," she said, first in clear English, then switching seamlessly to Japanese. "Liang toji shaken no meikaku na communication wo sokchin sasete itadakimasu." I am happy to facilitate clear communication between both parties. Tanaka smiled, the first genuine warm smile she had seen all evening. Excellent. Now, perhaps we should review these documents from the very beginning, with a proper translation of all terms this time. Croft's face performed a remarkable transformation, shifting from outrage to frantic calculation to practiced reptilian charm in a matter of seconds. "Of course," he said smoothly. "Transparency is the cornerstone of any good partnership." Across the dining room, servers whispered excitedly behind cupped hands. Cody stared, his mouth hanging open, at his colleague's astonishing, unbelievable elevation from pouring water to brokering a 9-figure deal. And in that moment, Amara Vance felt the invisible, suffocating barriers she had lived behind for 4 long years finally begin to crack and fall away. She was no longer background music. She had just become the conductor of the entire goddamn symphony. "If you'll all excuse us for just one moment," Croft said with that practiced, predatory charm. "I'd like a brief, private word with our unexpected new consultant." He gestured with his head towards the gilded hallway that led to the private dining rooms. Mr. Tanaka gave a slight, permissive nod, his attention already fully absorbed by the treacherous contract in front of him. Amara rose gracefully, her professional composure a flawless shield, and followed Croft from the table. The moment they rounded the corner, out of sight and earshot of the main dining room, Croft's mask of civility evaporated. He turned on her, whirling around and stepping into her personal space, his large frame menacing and uncomfortably close. "What in the absolute hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed, his voice a low, venomous growl. His expensive citrusy cologne couldn't quite mask the sour undercurrent of his rage. Amara stood her ground, refusing to be intimidated. "I am providing accurate translation services, sir, as requested." "Don't you play smart with me, you little—" He bit off the word. His finger jabbed the air just inches from her face. "You have deliberately and maliciously interfered in a private business negotiation. Do you have any idea who I am? Any concept of what I could do to your pathetic little career, such as it is?" The threat hung in the air between them, thick and suffocating. But Amara found herself feeling surprisingly, exhilaratingly steady. "I understand exactly who you are, Mr. Croft. And I understand exactly what you were attempting to do to Mr. Tanaka." His eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. "You're making a very serious, very stupid accusation. I could sue you for defamation until you and your entire family are living in a cardboard box. Or worse, I could make sure you never work a single day in this city again. One call from me, and Davies will fire you before dessert is even served." For one brief, flickering moment, raw fear lanced through her. The practical, terrifying concerns of rent due next week, of Grand's desperately needed medications, of survival itself. But it was just as quickly extinguished by something far older and far stronger. The profound, soul-deep certainty that she was, for the first time in a very long time, standing firmly in her own truth. "Is there a problem here?" Mr. Tanaka's calm voice came from directly behind them. He had approached with the silent tread of a hunter, his keen eyes taking in the entire scene. Croft's aggressive posture, the fury on his face, Amara's quiet defiance. Croft immediately recoiled, as if he'd been burned, his businessman's smile snapping back into place. "Not at all, Kenji. Just clarifying a few points with your translator to ensure we're all on the same page." "Good," Tanaka replied. though his cool, knowing expression made it clear he understood exactly what had been happening. "Because we have very important matters to discuss, and I would prefer to have Miss Vance's assistance in ensuring absolutely nothing gets lost in translation ever again." As they walked back to the table, Amara could feel Croft's eyes burning into her back, a silent, seething promise that this was very, very far from over. Back at the table, the atmosphere had transformed dramatically. Where there had been loud, boisterous business banter, there was now a focused, surgical silence. The documents were spread before them like a patient on an operating table. Tanaka's team had physically rearranged themselves. Their top legal counsel was now positioned prominently, a digital tablet open to a database of international trade law. "Let's address Section 7, Subparagraph B, directly," Tanaka said, tapping a well-manicured finger on the offending document. "Ms. Vance, would you please translate this entire section precisely and literally?" She leaned forward, her eyes scanning the dense, deliberately obfuscated legal text. The clause was a masterpiece of malicious ambiguity, its true implications buried deep within layers of technical jargon. This clause states that all derivative technologies developed during the course of the partnership would be jointly owned, she began, translating into clear, precise Japanese. However, it defines derivative to include any system that incorporates, interfaces with, or is improved by Cybercore's pre-existing proprietary algorithms. Tanaka's legal counsel frowned deeply. That would effectively reclassify our entire core AI engine as derivative the moment it's integrated with Croft Global's systems. It's an intellectual property seizure clause. Croft maintained his slick, professional smile. It's standard industry language, a boilerplate, designed to protect the investments of both parties. A curious definition of standard, Tanaka replied coolly. "Ms. Vance, please explain our concern to Mr. Croft in precise English." As Amara clearly and concisely translated the technical and legal objections, she saw Croft's expression begin to harden. He was losing control of the narrative, the room, and the deal, and he knew it. "Perhaps we could find a compromise," Croft suggested, sliding a different document from his briefcase. "We've prepared several alternative options." The new proposal contained equally predatory terms, just cleverly disguised in different language. When Amara accurately translated these as well, exposing the trap within them, the tension at the table thickened to the point of being suffocating. "Mr. Croft," Tanaka said finally, his voice calm but lethal, "I am beginning to seriously question whether we share the same fundamental understanding of what the word partnership means." Croft's knuckles had turned white where he gripped his pen. "Business is business, Kenji. Surely in Japan you understand that everyone seeks an advantage." "Be careful, Mr. Croft," Tanaka warned, his voice still deceptively pleasant, but his eyes as sharp as splintered glass. Lazy cultural stereotypes rarely improve the outcome of a negotiation. The thin veneer of professional diplomacy was unraveling, disintegrating in real time. Tanaka's team exchanged concerned, angry glances. One of them began typing furiously on his phone, likely to their headquarters in Tokyo. Croft's American colleague was whispering urgently in his ear. Amara found herself sitting at the quiet epicenter of a 9-figure business relationship imploding before her very eyes. The entire evening teetered on a knife's edge. Fortunes and careers hung in the balance, including, quite possibly, her own. The atmosphere around the table had plunged to Arctic levels. Tanaka's CFO was now speaking in rapid-fire Japanese about the merits of walking away from the deal entirely and issuing a press release about Croft Global's unethical negotiation tactics. Croft's colleague was frantically calculating potential losses on a tablet hidden beneath the table. The partnership wasn't just disintegrating, it was turning toxic. Amara observed the powerful, subtle cultural currents flowing just beneath the surface of the conflict. Her years of academic study, the countless hours spent poring over texts on cross-cultural communication, had taught her that these negotiations weren't just about language and contracts. They were about deeply ingrained cultural frameworks, honor, and the critical concept of saving face. "Tanaka-sama," she said quietly in Japanese, choosing a more deferential form of address. "May I offer a brief observation?" He gave a curt nod, his curiosity momentarily overriding his mounting frustration. "In American business culture, particularly in certain aggressive sectors," she began, choosing her words with extreme care, "these kinds of hardline negotiation tactics are often considered standard practice. It is a strategy of pushing boundaries to their absolute limit to see where the other party will draw the line. It is not necessarily perceived as a sign of personal disrespect, but rather as an expected, if unpleasant, part of the process." Tanaka considered this for a long moment, then responded in Japanese. "And in Japanese business culture, trust and mutual respect, shinrai, precede all contractual details. Without the former, the latter has no value." Amara turned her attention back to Croft, switching seamlessly to English. "Mr. Tanaka understands the nature of competitive negotiations, sir, but his concern has now moved beyond the specific terms of the contract. The aggressive approach itself has created a foundational trust issue that now threatens the very viability of any potential partnership." Croft's eyes narrowed, but for the first time that evening, something in his expression shifted. For the first time, he seemed to be truly listening. "Mr. Croft," Amara continued, drawing on every bit of her academic training, "in Japanese business culture, the concept of nemawashi, the informal process of building consensus and relationships, is fundamental. Contracts are meant to formalize a relationship built on trust, not to create that trust through force." A heavy silence fell over the table as Adrian Croft processed this. "What would you suggest?" he finally asked, the question addressed directly to Amara for the first time as a peer, not a servant. "Perhaps a complete reset," she offered, "starting with shared principles of partnership rather than debating specific, contentious terms. Establish a mutual understanding of what a successful partnership looks like to both companies before attempting to capture that understanding in contractual language." Tanaka nodded his approval. "A wise approach." Croft studied Tanaka's face for a long, tense moment. Then he made a decision. He took the stack of controversial documents, pushed them to the far side of the table, and placed a blank leather-bound notepad in the very center. "Let's start fresh," he said, his voice stripped of its earlier arrogance. "No hidden clauses, no aggressive tactics. Tell me, Kenji, what core principles would make this partnership truly valuable to Cybercore?" The negotiation, once dead, had just found a new life, with Amara Vance as its unexpected beating heart. As the conversation pivoted from adversarial haggling to a collaborative discussion of core principles, Amara's role underwent a profound transformation. She was no longer a mere translator. She became a cultural bridge, a vital conduit for true understanding. She navigated the complex linguistic and conceptual terrain with breathtaking precision, moving seamlessly between Japanese and English, while deftly capturing layers of nuance, technical detail, and crucial cultural context that a simple word-for-word translation would have missed entirely. When Tanaka described his company's revolutionary AI architecture using specialized internal Japanese terminology, Amara didn't just translate the words. She rendered the core concepts in technically precise English that Croft's team could instantly comprehend. The recursive neural pathway architecture he's describing is functionally similar to your own quantum emulation system, she explained directly to Croft's CTO, but with a fundamental philosophical difference in how it models and processes uncertainty variables, what they refer to as yuragi. When complex legal terms arose that had no direct Japanese equivalent, she provided clear, contextual explanations rather than clumsy literal translations, ensuring that genuine comprehension, not just vocabulary matching, was achieved on both sides. The discussion grew increasingly technical, a deep dive into algorithm parameters, machine learning protocols, encrypted data streams, and proprietary systems. Yet Amara never hesitated, effortlessly drawing upon her deep academic background to maintain the fluid, uninterrupted flow of communication. Soon, Tanaka's team began directing their most complex questions through her, implicitly trusting her to convey not just their words, but their precise intentions. Croft's own technical officers stopped waiting for the official translator to speak, instead watching Amara's face intently as she spoke, recognizing the incredible value of her real-time insights. Ask them about their protocol for mitigating latency issues in globally distributed networks, Croft requested, now addressing her directly as an essential member of his team. As the dialogue progressed, even Manager Davies, who was still hovering anxiously near the dais, couldn't help but look at Amara with a dawning sense of awe. The server he had callously instructed to tone down the Southern thing was now single-handedly guiding a 9-figure international negotiation with the confidence and expertise of a seasoned diplomat. A quiet, profound satisfaction bloomed in Amara's chest as she continued to translate. This was it. This was the work she had trained for her entire adult life. Not just converting words from one language to another, but genuinely connecting minds across the vast, often treacherous divides of culture and language. As the waitstaff, moving with extreme deference and curiosity, cleared the main course dishes, the conversation finally shifted to a more relaxed, personable tone. The initial framework of a new, more equitable deal had been established, with both parties finding a wealth of common ground that hadn't seemed remotely possible just an hour earlier. "I am intensely curious, Ms. Vance," Mr. Tanaka said, turning to her during a natural pause before dessert was served. "Your Japanese is far beyond exceptional. It's academic level but peppered with authentic Kyoto colloquialisms. It's a rare combination. Where, precisely, did you study?" "The University of Tokyo," she replied. "I completed my master's there in comparative linguistics 4 years ago. My thesis focused on the sociolinguistics of business communication between Eastern and Western cultures." Croft, who had been absently checking his phone, looked up with a sudden sharp jolt of interest. "Before that, I did my undergraduate work at Georgetown," Amara continued, "with a double major in Japanese language and international commerce." "Extraordinary credentials," Tanaka remarked, a look of sincere admiration on his face. He gestured discreetly to the opulent restaurant around them. "How did you find yourself here?" Amara took a deliberate sip of water, composing her thoughts. This wasn't a story she was accustomed to sharing. "I had been accepted to a PhD program at Stanford," she explained, her voice even. "My dissertation was going to explore how linguistic framing shapes the outcomes of international business negotiations. Ironically enough." A small, wry smile touched her lips. "But my grandmother, the woman who raised me, had a series of debilitating strokes. She required full-time care, and I am her only remaining family. So I postponed academia indefinitely and found work that offered decent health insurance and the flexible hours I needed." Tanaka nodded slowly, thoughtfully. "Family responsibility, oya koko, is a core value in our culture. Your grandmother must be a very proud woman." "She reminds me every single day that education is a jewel that no one can ever steal," Amara said, the familiar phrase a warm and steadying presence even in this high-powered, formal setting. "And do you speak any other languages with such formidable fluency?" Tanaka inquired. French and Spanish professionally, she replied, and enough Korean and Mandarin to get by in most business settings. I was beginning to study Arabic before. She trailed off, gesturing slightly to indicate the circumstances that had upended her life. Adrian Croft was now staring at her with entirely new eyes, calculating, assessing, as if he was looking at a priceless asset he had previously, catastrophically, overlooked. So, you've spent the last 4 years serving men like me their dinner, he mused aloud, the words directed as much to himself as to her, while speaking more languages than my entire international executive team combined. Yes, sir, Amara replied simply, a world of meaning packed into those 2 words. Would you care to see the dessert menu now? The dessert plates had been cleared, the espressos served and drunk. Outside the grand windows of Ethelgard, the city lights sparkled like a carpet of fallen stars against the inky black sky. 3 full hours had passed since Amara had first spoken Japanese at the table. 3 hours that had completely and utterly transformed the trajectory of the entire evening. I believe we have the framework for something truly valuable here, Tanaka said, reviewing the handwritten principles they had all agreed upon. My legal team in Tokyo will draft new documents tonight that accurately reflect these terms. Croft nodded, his earlier aggression now completely replaced by a genuine, energized engagement. I'll have our people strip out all the problematic clauses, a completely clean slate, as we agreed. The 2 CEOs exchanged a look of cautious, hard-won respect. It wasn't quite friendship, but it was a foundation of mutual understanding that hadn't existed just a few short hours before. We can finalize everything at a formal meeting tomorrow, Tanaka continued. 9 o'clock at your corporate headquarters? We'll be ready for you, Croft confirmed. Then he hesitated. And, Kenji, would it be possible? He glanced toward Amara. That is, Ms. Vance, would you be willing to join us for that meeting as well? To ensure our continued clarity? Before Amara could even formulate a response, Tanaka interjected smoothly. I was just about to suggest the exact same thing. Ms. Vance, your expertise has proven to be utterly invaluable. The full, staggering realization of what was happening finally washed over Amara. She was being invited into a corporate boardroom, not to serve coffee and pastries, but to facilitate and advise on a multi-million-dollar international deal. I would be honored, she managed to say, her voice the epitome of professional composure, betraying none of the triumphant, emotional earthquake happening beneath the surface. As the 2 groups of executives stood to leave, Tanaka offered his hand to Amara, a formal, respectful gesture between equals. Thank you for your exceptional service tonight, Ms. Vance. You have single-handedly changed the course of this partnership for the better. Then, Adrian Croft extended his hand as well, his expression suggesting he was still trying to process the evening's seismic, unexpected developments. Indeed, he said, shaking her hand firmly. It seems I have been catastrophically underestimating the talent right in front of me. The next morning found Amara Vance standing in the sleek, minimalist lobby of Croft Global Headquarters, dressed in her one good interview suit, a classic Navy ensemble she hadn't worn since her last academic conference 4 years ago. She had called in sick to the restaurant, the first time she had ever done so, and had spent hours joyfully briefing her astounded grandmother on the extraordinary, unbelievable events of the previous evening. The executive conference room was on the 50th floor, overlooking the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a panoramic view that made the world below seem small and distant. Tanaka and his team were already seated when she arrived. Croft and his executives entered moments later. The meeting proceeded with a surprising, newfound efficiency. The foundation of trust and shared principles built the night before enabled the quick, amicable resolution of all remaining details. Amara provided precise translations when needed, though she noticed that both sides were now making a concerted effort to communicate more directly, with far greater patience and mutual respect. As the final, freshly drafted documents were being prepared for their official signatures, Mr. Tanaka turned to her. "Ms. Vance, before we conclude, I would like to discuss your future," he said in English, deliberately ensuring that everyone present could understand. "Cybercore is significantly expanding our North American operations. We are in desperate need of a leader who can truly understand both Japanese and American business cultures. Someone who can build bridges, not walls." He slid a thick, embossed folder across the polished mahogany table toward her. "I would like to offer you a position as our new Director of International Communications for North America. The role will include overseeing our entire cross-cultural business development team and serving as the primary liaison for all key strategic partnerships, such as this one." Amara slowly opened the folder. The compensation package detailed inside, complete with full executive healthcare benefits, a generous relocation allowance, and a 6-figure salary that was more than she had made in the last 4 years combined, represented the very future she had worked so hard for before life had so cruelly intervened. "The position would begin immediately," Tanaka continued, "and it includes comprehensive, flexible work arrangements to accommodate your family responsibilities." For the first time in her adult life, Amara Vance, the master of 5 languages, found herself utterly at a loss for words. "Actually," Adrian Croft interjected, clearing his throat loudly, "before you answer, Croft Global would like to make a counteroffer." All eyes in the room swiveled to him. The room fell silent again, a new tension crackling in the carefully balanced atmosphere. "We also have an urgent and pressing need for someone with Ms. Vance's unique and formidable capabilities," he continued. "Our international M&A division has been searching for a cultural integration specialist for months." Tanaka raised a single, questioning eyebrow, but said nothing. Croft shifted uncomfortably in his expensive chair before plowing forward. "Before any of that happens, however, I owe you a personal apology, Amara." The words seemed to physically pain him to say. Adrian Croft was not a man accustomed to admitting fault. "My behavior last night was inexcusable, inappropriate, and deeply unprofessional. I made assumptions about you based on nothing of substance. I judged your capabilities by the uniform you were wearing rather than by the content of your character." He straightened his silk tie, a nervous, uncharacteristic gesture. In business, that kind of lazy, arrogant mistake costs you money. In life, it costs you something far more valuable. The profound irony wasn't lost on anyone present, least of all Amara. The very man who had mockingly sneered, "Are you trying to gargle it?" was now visibly struggling to find the right words himself. "So," he finished awkwardly, "I hope you'll consider our offer as well, though frankly I would understand completely if you told me to go to hell." That evening, Amara Vance returned to Ethelgard. Not as a server, but as a patron. She had called Davies earlier in the day to tender her resignation, explaining calmly that she would not be coming back. His sputtered protests had died in his throat the moment she mentioned her new position as a director at Cybercore. "I'd like to reserve a large table," she had told the hostess, who didn't recognize her voice over the phone, "to treat my former colleagues to dinner after their shift ends tonight." Walking through the restaurant as a customer created a surreal, almost dizzying sense of displacement. Tables she had wiped down and set thousands of times now looked entirely different from this side of the invisible barrier. Hector, the dishwasher, spotted her first, his eyes going wide as he nearly dropped a heavy stack of plates. "Amara, Misha, what are you doing here dressed like that?" Soon she was surrounded by her former co-workers, their faces a whirlwind of confusion, curiosity, and a dawning, growing excitement as the story of the previous night spread like wildfire through the staff in hushed, excited conversations. Manager Davies approached her cautiously, his usual authoritative swagger noticeably absent, replaced by a nervous deference. "Vance, Ms. Vance, I didn't expect to see you again." "I wanted to say goodbye properly," she replied with a gracious smile, "and to thank everyone for their kindness." When the last patron had finally left and the restaurant officially closed, the entire staff gathered around the large dais, tables they normally only served at. Over plates of exquisite food they usually only carried and presented, Amara shared her full story. "You're really leaving us for some fancy corporate job?" Cody asked, his earlier jealousy now completely replaced by a look of genuine, slack-jawed awe. "Not just any job, you idiot," Maria, the hostess, corrected him with a playful slap on the arm. "She's going to be a director, with an office on the 50th floor and everything." As the congratulations and excited toasts flowed, Amara noticed how differently her colleagues now looked at her. It wasn't with envy, but with a sense of shared possibility. If the invisible walls could crumble for her, then perhaps, just perhaps, they could crumble for others too. "To Amara," Hector proposed, raising his water glass high, "who reminded every single one of us to never, ever judge a book by its cover, or a person by the uniform they wear." 1 month later, Amara stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of her new corner office, watching the city below transition from the warm gold of dusk to the sparkling diamond and velvet of night. Her new workspace reflected her rapidly, wonderfully evolving life. Her framed diplomas and degrees now proudly displayed on the wall instead of hidden away in a storage unit. A small, elegant jade plant, a gift from Mr. Tanaka, sat beside her state-of-the-art computer. And a photo of her grandmother, smiling joyfully in a new silver frame, occupied the place of honor on her desk. The past 4 weeks had unfolded like a beautiful, impossible dream. Her first paycheck had completely covered all of Gran's outstanding medical bills, with more than enough left over. They had moved to a spacious ground-floor apartment in a new building with full accessibility features, eliminating her grandmother's painful daily struggle with stairs. Most importantly, Amara had been able to arrange for excellent part-time home care, allowing her grandmother a level of dignity and independence she hadn't enjoyed in years. Her phone chimed with a calendar reminder. Mentoring session, 6 p.m. Downstairs in the sleek company cafe, 3 recent university graduates were waiting for her. All 3 came from underprivileged backgrounds similar to her own. All 3 were brilliant, multilingual, and had been repeatedly overlooked by traditional corporate recruitment pipelines. A key part of Amara's new role, a part she had insisted on creating herself, involved identifying and cultivating exactly this kind of overlooked, undervalued talent. As she gathered her notes for the session, Amara thought about the night that had changed everything. One single moment of courage, of choosing to stand in her own truth despite the terrifying risks, had unlocked a future she had once believed was lost to her forever. Sometimes, she realized, the most important, most revolutionary step a person can take is to simply refuse to remain invisible. The quarterly leadership summit brought Amara face-to-face with both Mr. Tanaka and Adrian Croft. The Cybercore Croft global partnership had flourished beyond anyone's expectations, with Amara's new team of cultural liaisons bridging communication gaps that would have previously derailed progress entirely. After the formal presentations, Tanaka approached her with one of his rare, warm smiles. "I trust your grandmother is well?" "She's doing much better, thank you," Amara replied, her heart full. "The new specialists and treatments are helping tremendously." Croft joined them, his demeanor now consistently, noticeably more humble and respectful than during their first chaotic encounter. Your team's new cultural integration framework has increased our international division's project efficiency by over 30% in just 1 quarter. It's impressive work, Amara. Thank you, sir, she said. We're just getting started. As the executives moved on to other conversations, a young server, a man of color, approached with a tray of drinks. Amara watched as the executive's eyes slid right past him, as if he were nothing more than a part of the decor, just as their eyes had once slid past her. Thank you, she said to the young man, making deliberate, meaningful eye contact as she took a glass. I really appreciate your attention to detail tonight. The young man's startled, grateful smile reminded her so powerfully of herself, not so very long ago. Later that evening, as she stood to deliver the closing address at the summit, Amara shared the core philosophy that now guided her professional and personal life. Talent speaks all languages, she told the assembled crowd of international executives. But true leadership requires learning how to listen. The most valuable assets in any organization, in any room, are often hiding in plain sight. Not because they are trying to be invisible, but because we, as leaders, have forgotten how to truly see them. If this story resonated with you, remember that everyone has hidden talents and untold stories waiting to be recognized, perhaps even you. Who in your own life might you be underestimating? More importantly, who might be underestimating you? Don't let powerful, inspirational stories like Amara's remain invisible. Subscribe to our channel right now and be sure to hit that like button to help us reach more people who need to hear this message. We release new, true stories every single week that challenge perspectives and celebrate the hidden, incredible potential within all of us. Join our community, where we firmly believe that every single person has a story worth telling, including you. This is real-life legends, because the most powerful narratives are always the ones that forever change how we see the world, and more importantly, how we see ourselves.